Okay, Unit 1, Concept 1A. This concept is all about the basics of geometry. Our objective is to name, describe, and draw basic geometric ideas, including points, lines, segments, and rays. So our first page here, we have lots of vocabulary. We're going to go through these and show examples for each one. First definition is a point. A point is an exact location in space. A point has no size, and it is represented by a dot. Okay. On a coordinate plane, a point is an ordered pair. And remember, an ordered pair is an XY coordinate. And when you're naming a point, you should always use a capital letter. Okay, so an example of this, let me make my handwriting a little bit better. An example of this would be, let's make our point here, or our dot. And whenever we're naming this, we want to use a capital letter. You can pick any capital letter. I'm going to pick the letter M. Okay, that's our example of our point. Next definition, we have a line. A line is a figure formed through 2 points that goes on forever in 2 directions, and a line cannot be measured because it goes on forever in 2 directions. Through any 2 points, there is exactly, see if we can fit it all, 1 line. And a line is named by any 2 points that are on the line, or you could also name it with the word line and a lowercase letter. If you are ever using a lowercase letter, it is very important for you to still include this word line, and I will show you an example of that in just a moment. So our first example, if I draw this line, I'm going to put arrows on both sides representing that it goes on forever. Whoops. Oh my goodness. It goes on forever in 2 directions. So that is what I'm showing here with these arrows. I'm going to place 2 points on this line, and I'm going to call them, we'll just say A and B. So whenever we name this, it says here that a line is named by any 2 points on the line. So I can name this A, B. An important thing here is to put the line with the arrows on the top, showing that this is a line rather than a segment or ray that we'll get to in a moment. So you must include those arrows showing that it's a line that goes on forever in 2 directions. Another way that you can label a line, if I draw another line, still including my arrows, you can label it with a lowercase letter, and you have to include the word line. So instead of putting points on this line, I'm going to just call it M. So I didn't put that on the line, I just kind of hovered it over the top. When I name this line, I can call it line M. Okay, so depending on how your lines are labeled, you can name them either way. All right, moving on to the next definition, we have collinear. Collinear is points that form a line. Okay, so an example of this, if we draw a line, always make sure to include your arrows there. I'm going to just place 3 points on this line randomly, and I'm going to name them A, B, and C. So in this case, I'm going to say A, B, and C are collinear because they are all on the same line. Okay. Next definition is a segment. Okay. So this is part of a line, and it has 2 endpoints. So remember, a line goes on forever in two directions. A segment does not. It has two endpoints, meaning it starts and ends. A segment can be measured, and a segment is named using its endpoints. Okay, so let's look at an example. So I'm going to draw this with my, instead of arrows on the end, I'm putting points representing a starting and ending point. I'll label these, let's change it up. We'll do J and K. Okay, so if I were to name this segment, I would put JK, and I would put just a line over the top, no arrows here, because we're representing that it starts and ends, and this is a segment. All right, next definition is array. Array is also part of a line. It has one endpoint that goes forever in only one direction. Array is named with the endpoint and one other point on the array. Might have to go over our line a little bit. That's okay. Another point on the array, okay? The name of the array always begins with the endpoint. That's important so that we know where the endpoint is. And the array symbol always points to the right when you're labeling a array. Okay, so an example of this, let's draw an array here. We do put an arrow on one side because it does say that it goes forever in one direction. Then we have an endpoint on the other side showing this one endpoint that we have. And I'm going to put another point here to use when we are naming this array. Okay, so we're going to label our endpoint A, and we'll label this other point B. So whenever we name this, we want to make sure we are naming with the endpoint and one other point on the array, and we name the array when the name of the array always begins with the endpoint. So when we name this, we want to put A first and then B because A is the endpoint. And down here where it says the symbol always points to the right, we must put that one arrow pointing to the right when we label array. Okay, last definition of this page is an opposite array. So opposite arrays are arrays that share an endpoint and go in opposite directions. Opposite arrays form a line. Okay, so let's make an example here. I'm going to make one array going this way. We will put another point here for naming sake. Let's put this as BC. So this array is array BC. Now, to make an opposite array, they must share an endpoint and go in opposite directions. So the other array's endpoint is still going to be B, but I'm going to make it go to the left instead, and I will put a point here to name this A. Okay, so this opposite array would be called array BA. And together, those two arrays form a line. All right, go ahead and flip your page. This is some independent practice. There are 4 questions. I encourage you to pause the video and see if you guys can answer these on your own, and then use this video as a key once you are completed. So the first question is, how many different lines appear above? Now, if we go back to our definition of a line, remember here it says, through any 2 points, there is exactly one line. So if we go to our picture, even though there are 3 points, H, M, and T, there's one line here. We could name it in different ways. However, we're still representing the same line. The line doesn't change because remember, it cannot be measured and it goes on forever in both directions. So here we only have one line. Okay. Number 2 is talking about segments. It asks us how many different segments appear above. Now this is a little different than lines because remember, segments can be measured. So there are different segments here. So first segment I see is from H to M. It has 2 endpoints, H and M. So we're going to name that and we're going to put that on number 2. And remember to put that line above it to represent it as a segment. Okay, and you could also name this as MH. However, that does not change the measure of the segment. It's still the same segment. So either way you name that, it's just one segment. Another segment I see here is MT or TM, however you wanted to name that. It's the same segment. That would be a second segment I see here. And the last one would be our longer one, H all the way to T. Or you could also do TH, however you wanted to name that. But I'm going to name it as HT. And remember, you'll want to put those lines on the top with no arrows representing a segment. I don't see any other segments in this diagram, so I would say we have 3 segments in this picture. Okay. Number 3 is HT, ray HT, the same as ray TH. Okay, let's talk about that. So if we go back up to the picture here, I'm going to erase my markings. Ray HT. Remember when we're naming a ray, it has to name the endpoint first. Whoops. So H is going to be the endpoint of ray HT. So on our diagram, we are going to have a point on H, and our ray is going to go towards T forever in that direction. Okay? Then the second ray that's named here, the letter that's named first is T. So T must be our endpoint for this ray. So we're going to put our point on T, and it goes forever towards H in that direction. Now you can see that my black and my blue colors here are not labeling the same ray. So our answer for number 3 is no. Ray HT and ray TH are not the same. Okay, and our last question here is name 2 opposite rays shown above. So again, I can erase my drawings here. So right off the bat, I know that opposite rays must share an endpoint. So I'm going to assume they share M because that is the one in the middle. So if they both share that as their endpoint, one of them must go towards T, which that one would be labeled MT, and one of them must go towards H, which would be labeled MH with my arrow on the top. Now together, these both have the same endpoint at M. They go in opposite directions, and together they form a line. And if you go back to our definition, that meets the criteria of an opposite ray. So we have our answer here. MH and MT are our 2 opposite rays. There you go. That is all for concept 1A. Go to the next video for concept 1B.